So I'm going to be doing a petition about this assisted suicide bill, but it's going to be more of a prayer than a petition. But it's not actually about the argument's not a religious one. It's actually it's a legal. It is a religious subject, but a legal argument, right? It's purely legal. There's a legal reason, a reason in law why you can't have the assisted suicide bill, right? It's unlawful, right? Now, the people who support this bill, I don't think they fully understand that principle, right? Which is what I need to explain, that the legal part of it. And I don't really think they want to accept the legal part of it, right? There are a few explanations to put down, but it's really... It's almost like alpha and omega, right? You know, like you've got alpha and omega, and your alpha and omega is almost supposed to be like your positive and minus on, like, an electric circuit, right? Like you've got the positive end and the negative end of a battery, right? So this is what, and I think that people who support this bill, people like Kim Leadbeater, right? And then you've got Jamie Stone, right? Who was a Liberal Democrat, but also Ed Davies, the Liberal Democrat leader. In fact, the older Liberal Party, the Liberal Democrats, were against this bill until it's the new Liberal Democrat Party which is for it. Although that Lord Joff, who's actually passed away now, Lord Joff of Liddington, right? He was a pusher for this bill. But in more modern years, it seems like it definitely is sort of like the Ed Davey crew who are pushing this bill. I thought it was Labour, but not all the Scottish Labour people support this bill, so it's not just like an entire Labour Party thing. This Kim Leadbeater has been pushing this bill, but I think that Ed Davey has got connections to people with disabilities and things like that, and carers, right? And he's a carer oriented man, which is a good thing, like, a charitable man who is involved with, caring and looking after people with disabilities and things like that, right? So I think from his point of view, he probably thinks that it's a good idea, but it isn't lawful. And the thing is this, right? The Liberal Democrats want to debate this matter, right? They want to resolve this issue through a political debate in an elected parliament, right? And this is what they're doing in the Scottish Parliament. They went through the first phase of it, and now they've been through the first phase of it in England. But I think some other people abstained from voting, actually, right? So what Jamie Stone and Ed Davey and Kim Leadbeater want to do is argue their points on this bill, why it should be law, right, through a political debate process, right, in parliaments, right? Now, the thing with that process is that they can only do that because someone invented and created a parliament, right? And they invented and created MPs so you could elect them, right? If there wasn't an election process for MPs, right, then those people wouldn't be there, okay? And they wouldn't be there debating anything, right? So they're privileged to have been elected through a position that someone set it up, right? Someone set up a parliament, and if you read William Prynne, they invited all the bishops, from all the different areas and the barons and lords, right? So someone set up, it's like, someone set up a tennis club, right? Or someone set up a cricket club, or someone set up a football team, or set up a football league, right? Who set it up? Someone set it up, right? And, even though William the Conqueror, came over, they'd already got the Witten Ganton, or whatever it was called, and they'd already got, Edward the Confessor had already got, the kind of like German Gwat, or whatever it was called. They got the equivalent of parliaments, right? Now, the Liberal Democrats didn't invent Parliament, right? And they didn't invent the Christian church, right? Obviously, Jesus, but before Jesus, right? They'd already got, the First Testament and, the Jewish religion and so forth. There were other religions, right? Who set up Hinduism, right? The Liberal Democrats, a political party, someone set it up, right? Now, the thing is, Jamie Stone and Ed Davey, did not invent Parliament, right? They didn't invent or create it. And they can only go through processes which are in place, right? Now, this is the thing, right? You can have, at the moment, they've got a process by which you're allowed to debate and introduce bills, right, and debate them. If someone didn't invent that process and set it up, right, you won't be able to do it. Now, Jamie Stone and Ed Davey, right, and whatever MPs, Kim Leadbeater, right, they can debate legislation all they want, right, but the King, right, if it gets passed by the House of Lords, it still has to be given royal assent by the King, even Scottish legislation, right, in the Scottish Parliament, because they're trying to put a bill through as well. They're coming at it from all angles, from all sides. Lord Falconer's got one that he's trying to put through, and the House of Commons have got one, and there's that Scottish one, so that they're really trying to do the cup under the ball trick, and they're trying to get them all. They're trying to put so many of them through that someone will not notice one of them getting through, right? Now, this is the thing, right? You have to have the King, right? If he doesn't give royal assent to legislation, right, it can't go through. Now, that's a component in a process, okay? Now, the House of Lords can send legislation back for amendments and so forth, but they themselves apparently cannot just, reject it or whatever. They can do certain things, right? Now, this is the thing, right? Jamie Stone and Ed Davey believe, I think, that if they can debate it and argue a reason through it with points, right, of debate, political debate, and if enough people in the chamber, right, vote on it, then they stuck it on a conveyor belt, and it's got a guarantee seal on it, right? It's guaranteed to become law. Because when they put it on that conveyor belt, it goes along the conveyor belt, and then the King signs it, right? But what happens if the King wasn't there, right? What happens if there was an emergency on, right, and he had to go to India or Australia or America or something, and he was away, and they had to wait, right? And then what if Parliament ran out of time? Because if you don't get a bill through when Parliament runs out of time, then that's it. Bills don't carry on through to other parliaments, right? Anything could happen, right? What if World War III kicks off? Or what if just, there are multiple reasons, but this is the thing. The King is a human being, a person, right? And it's a component. What happens if Jamie Stone and Ed Davies said, well, we don't think the King should have to give it royal assent. We want it to become the law without the King, right? Now, at the moment, they can't do that, right? It's not... How would Ed Davey and Jamie Stone, I keep wanting to say Ed Miliband when I say Ed Davey, how could Scottish and English Parliament change the law now so that the King doesn't have to give it royal assent, right? Could they just put an act through simply that, royal, acts don't have to have royal assent? Why didn't they do that, 20 years ago, right? At the moment, that's the process. Now, how hard would it be for them to get the House of Lords to agree that the King doesn't have to give legislation royal assent, right? Or what happens if the House of Lords said that they want to be able to reject legislation? The House of Commons won't put up with it, and the House of Commons would argue and debate against the House of Lords being able to be the ones who can reject it, right? Or whatever. Or what happens if the House of Commons wanted them to be able to give royal assent, there's a hell of a lot of legislation built up on it, right? It wouldn't be easy for the Lib Dems to make it so the king doesn't have to give royal assent to legislation, right? Because all acts of law rely on it, right? It's just one of those parts of the components which currently is an intricate and particular part of it, right? So now the thing is, right, the law itself, right, legislation it's writing, okay? It's writing. It's just basically rules, right? Rules of law. But the thing is, what do the rules say, right? What do the rules of law actually say and mean, right? And why does anyone even follow the rules or agree to follow the rules? Now, the thing is, the law and legislation, right? It's creative. It just like it comes from human beings, right? Human beings' minds. Now, the thing is that the very process which I've just described, the actual process of creating legislation, like there is a House of Commons, there is House of Lords, you know, MPs will be elected through a process of election, right? Each one of those things is a process in law which has legislation to govern it, right? So Jamie Stone MP has to fill a form in order to become a candidate for an election, and then he has to go, to a polling station, and all this is written in law, right? And it's rules, right? Now, all these rules are set up processes which are based on processes, which are based on processes, which are based on processes, right? And that's how the whole of Parliament works, like a car, you know? You've got a steering system, right? You've got a handbrake system and so forth, right? But if there was no gravity, right? Gravity, right, holds the car to the ground, right? And gravity, right, it gives a car traction on the floor, right? So no matter what your brake systems and indicators and engine and windscreen wipers and fuel system and all these different components on a car, right, make it work, and Jamie Stone's like, hey, why don't we, change the headlights, or why don't we change the windscreen wiper design, or why don't we change the shape of the doors, and why don't we put a smaller engine in it, or make it environmentally friendly and make it electric or whatever. You can do all these things, and you can change all these components and processes like you're changing the law, right? But if you take away gravity, right, the car will just come away from the ground, and the wheels will spin round, and it will not move forward, right? It will lift up and float into the air, right? And not having any jet propulsion engines or anything like that, you haven't got anything to move it anywhere, right? It will just slowly float up and drift off into outer space. You will not drive forward, right? Because there is no gravity holding it to the surface of the earth, right? Now, this is like legislation, right? You can have all the laws in the world, right? You can have all the most intricate writing and laws, complicated text upon text upon text. If no one can read it, and if no one can understand it, no one knows what it means or what it is, right? Unless you've learned to read and write. And then when you've learned to read and write, you can learn and interpret the law, and then you have the knowledge of knowing what it means, right? Now, many people could learn to read and write, and many people could understand words and letters and understand the law. But what makes them obey the law, right? What makes them follow the law? They say, why should I have to follow the law, right? Why should I have to follow this law, right? This is the thing. Because we say so, because everyone says so, because people say so, because that's what people do, right? And this is the thing. You could debate with them. Shall we debate with a policeman? That I've just gone around and headbutted people and I shouldn't be arrested. We could debate that. We could have a political debate about it, right? If Jamie Stone got angry and punched someone, he could have a political debate with the police officer to say why he shouldn't be arrested, but it's still illegal, right? Like Mike Amesbury, headbutting someone or punching them, whatever, right? Now, this is the thing. Everyone generally does follow the law. Now, Jamie Stone and Ed Davey, right, they're in government, so they think people should follow the law. If they didn't, why would you have a job in the government and be a minister? And why would you be interested in legislation and putting bills through Parliament, right? Because that's what they're there for. If you thought law itself as a subject, right, this is the law. This is a load of rubbish, right? If you thought law itself was a load of tosh and you don't like the law and you don't think people should follow the law, why make law and get it put through, right? So you have to believe in law and you have to have the basic fundamental principle of, right, people should follow the law and I will follow the law, which means that I will do what the law says. Jamie Stone has to go register himself as a candidate, and he has to, make an effort to, advertise his campaign, and he has to go through the electoral process in order to get into Parliament, right? He doesn't debate with the, electoral agent that, I shouldn't have to do this, because, you can argue and have a political debate with them all day, but he is not going to get elected unless he registers himself in a parliamentary election, because that's what the rules say, right? Now, this is the thing. You've got to believe in the word of the law and also be able to understand it, but also you've got to agree in, obedience and complying with the law and doing what it says, right? Because everyone could say, well, we're not going to do what the law says. Like, law is, it's tosh. I don't agree with law, right? So they subscribe to the law. When you subscribe to the law, right, it means that you're a follower of law, you're a believer in law, right? You agree with law, right? Or at least these people want to debate it. They're allowed to debate the law and they're allowed to propose laws, but they've got to follow the law. Now, this is the thing. Like I said, law cannot be put into legal effect in this country unless the king gives it royal assent. But law comes from somewhere, right? It comes from the minds of humans. Now, this is the thing. Our legal system, according to the rules, according to the rule of law, right? To the rule of law, acts of law in England and Scotland, right, are attributed to, understood, right, and put into effect through God. That's the rules. It's got nothing to do with your religion, raid, crease, or anything. That is what it says. Now, if you can't understand that, then you can't read the law, right? You might as well, not know what A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P means. What is an umbrella? It's an object which you get out and when it's raining and you open it out and it stops rain coming from on you, right? I can describe something to you and you understand what I'm describing, right? Now, the law describes, right, how the law works. The law describes, right, what it is itself, where it comes from, right, and what puts it into effect. Just like a car manual describes how to drive the car, tells you where it was manufactured, like in Taiwan or, by Mercedes-Benz or whatever. It tells you, and it's got a symbol on the front of the car, like a BMW badge or a logo, right? Like the King's logo, right? But the rules the rules of government and the rules of process and procedure and the rules of law, whether you like it or not or agree with it, right, tells you that this law is enacted into effect, right, through the grace of God. And it explains to you that that is the power by which it commands you and compels you, right? And obviously with the, so let's not forget his Majesty's, the King's Most Excellent Majesty, right? Obviously with the King's Most Excellent Majesty as well, right? Now, this is the thing. You don't have to, it's not a matter of whether you believe it or not, or whether you like it or not. And it's not a matter for debate, right? Because that's what it says, okay? That is what it says. And this is the thing. And when it comes to this assisted suicide bill, it's on a particular subject and on a particular thing, which is the killing of persons, right? Now, if it was a bill about, lemons or grapes or, fish stalls selling, haddock and salmon, it's not. It is a particular bill about something which is life and death, right? And on this particular subject, right, there are actually a set of rules which are, in fact, did these rules get debated by members of parliament, right? And this is the thing. Now, in a very similar kind of way, like Alpha and Omega, you've got the king giving royal assent to law. MPs can have political debates about legislation all they want, right? And they can draft bills, but until it gets a seal of royal assent, no one has to follow that law, right? And it's not actually official or in effect. Now, the thing is that the law says that the law actually is the legislation is coming from, right, and held into effect with the grace of God, and that force actually has, in law, in writing, in law, issued some instructions, right, as well. Now, those instructions were not issued from the king, and those instructions were not issued from an MP or whatever. They were actual instructions from God, right? And one of those is not to kill people, right? Now, they weren't debated by MPs, right? And it wasn't even given assent by the king because it came from God, right? And it was included in our legislation through various acts. There's an act of law in Scotland which acknowledges the Hebrew Bible, right? And other things. And the thing is that the law from which that is issued is actually the power that our legislation runs on, right? Because it runs on the divine power of God. In the instructions, it tells you. And the best way to put an analogy for this is like gravity, right? You say that, well, you could say that a car runs on diesel or a car runs on petrol or a car runs on electricity, right? You could say, well, shall we use the analogy that the petrol or the diesel or the electricity in the car battery is the equivalent of the divine power of God, and without that, the car can't move, right? I would suggest no. I would suggest that it's more kind of like the gravity, right? You might not have, because you don't believe in gravity, you don't have to believe in it, or you don't have to understand it, or you don't have to agree with it, but it's still there, right? It's still actually there, and you can still describe it, and people can debate it all they want, right? You can have 50 people jumping up and down and saying, look, I justify gravity, but then they come back down on land again, right? It's just there, right? And this is the thing. The car is designed to work with gravity holding it to the floor, right? Because it's called traction, right? Now, you need traction with human minds for them to obey and comply with the law, right? Because if they don't have any traction, right, they can just ignore the law, and everyone could go around headbutting each other, right? Or, jumping off cliffs, or, just having riots or whatever. Now, so this is the thing. Now, people are expected and supposed to comply with and obey the law through God's grace, right? However you describe it, you don't have to. No one has to believe in it or not, right? And it isn't a religious argument. There is no religious argument at all, because it's not based on whether you believe in it or not, or whether you subscribe to that religion or not. It is 100% pure, a matter of understanding, so you know what the hell that we're talking about, and the fact that it's a legal argument. It is an illegal. Well, it's not even a legal argument. It's actually a legal command, right? It's actually a legal command, and not one that you can debate or argue, because it didn't come from MPs, and it didn't actually even come from the king, and the king didn't give it consent, right? It's an inherited rule. It's an inherited rule of law, which is required for Parliament and the legislative government to work, whether they like it or not. And that it's an inherited aspect to transport, that we inherited gravity, right, on this planet, and that all vehicles, from trains to buses, except aeroplanes, can defy gravity, but all wheeled vehicles rely on gravity to work, right? Or they don't have any traction on the floor and they can't move anywhere, regardless whether you've got fuel in them or not, right? So they need the power of gravity to actually force them downwards to the ground to get traction, right? Which is the same as people's minds getting traction, right? To think that they should comply with the law. Now, that needs to be explained to MPs so they understand it, and so they follow the rules and obey the commandment, right? And there is no political debate. There isn't a political debate on the subject, because currently they can't really change that through voting for or against this particular bill, because the argument is not in the passing or rejecting of that bill. That argument is a process and debate of completely changing the entire structure of government and the model of government, right? Because that principle of the inherited rules in law, the inherited rules in law that we all have to follow, right? That component which is inherited, right, is inherited in a similar way to us. We've inherited gravity, right? And every person who designs or builds a car, right, has to include the rule and law of gravity into how the car works, unless he defies it. But building a vehicle like a plane or a helicopter or a rocket ship or a James Bond 007 jetpack, right, he's going to be changing it like. It would be the equivalent of a parliamentary process of changing it so the king doesn't give legislation royal assent, or the fact that it's not based on the Christian religion when it is, right? Because it is based on those rules and the instructions and commands which are understood and recognised. Now, therefore, we have to get people to understand and recognise that, and if they can't understand it or recognise it, and if they don't command and obey it, then they're breaking the rules and they're breaking the law. But they're there to make law that people comply with, and they want people to follow it. So they're hypocrites. They're like hypocritical, right? They're disgruntled that they've inherited a country and a government that has a set of rules inherently in effect, which you can't debate against. I think that's the best way to, you can't debate it, right? It's not up for debate, and definitely not up for debate in a bill. In that bill, it would be only up for debate if it was on the level of completely changing the entire model of government and the entire structure of government. It would be like having a government which used to be like a car, but then it's like a jet plane, right? Which doesn't it uses gravity, but it can defy gravity, obviously, as long as it's moving forward, because if a plane is not moving forward and got inertia, then it'll just fall down to the floor, right? So it's got to keep on moving. It's got to be continually in motion, I'm running, I'm passing. We didn't used to have parliaments all the time. They only used to be every, 3 or 4 years, right? And they weren't just faffing around with legislation all the time. They could just stop, right? But now it seems like the government itself is a jet plane. It's constantly got to be on the move and going full speed ahead, or else it'll just fall down and crash, They've always got to be, innovation and technology. They lead us to believe that we can't stop. We couldn't say, we'll have a parliament for a few years because the whole country or world would crash, right? Like a plane just falling out of the sky because it's not moving forward. You can't just stop and not have a parliament like a bus. Oh, stop, right? I'll wait for 3 weeks and then carry on again, right? Now the governments are convincing us, because, they're soaring, they're flying. No, we can't stop now, we've got to keep going, right? This is the thing. This is what they're convincing us to believe, we've got to keep up with Elon Musk's satellites and we've got to be continually pushing the human race to the max. There's no pausing, there's no stopping, this is the thing. Whether Ed Davey likes it or not is beside the point. He needs to be explained and understand that you have to be ignorant or sort of, you disregard the law or be ignorant to the law, right? You have to accept and understand what it actually means and what the rules actually are. And those rules, those commandments are inherited into it. And if they don't debate that subject, and if they don't educate themselves on that subject, if they don't come to an understanding of that, then the MPs are failing. Now, this is the thing, right? There are a lot of things wrong with the Petitioners Committee, and I don't think Jamie Stone completely appreciates the things that they're doing wrong, that he doesn't understand about the Petitioners Committee and certain processes. And look at Ed Davey, right? Ed Davey got a speeding ticket, right? He's meant to be the Right Honourable Ed Davey. He's meant to be on the Privy Council. Now, he's not allowed to be given a speeding ticket because he's a Member of Parliament, right? And it's privileged, right? Particularly not in session time. But he didn't use that privilege. Now, it doesn't really matter whether he believes in the privilege or not, or whether he thinks, well, I'd like to pay the speeding fine because, I'm a good man and, I'm not going to use this privilege to get out of paying it, right? The fact is that it's a contempt to prosecute him during Parliament sessions, right? Now, Ed Davey didn't know that law and he didn't claim it and he didn't use it. But that's what the law is for Parliament members. So Ed Davey doesn't fully know and understand the law of privilege for his own job and for Parliament, right? And Jamie Stone doesn't fully understand that the Petitioners Committee and its policy, which is only signed by 2 people and not even law, is in contempt of the processes of petitioning and the legal right to share them. And it's out of order. And the people who are making these decisions are like 4 people who weren't elected, right? Making judicial decisions. They're not sworn in. They're not magistrates. And they're not selected by a jury at random of public electors, different every time. They're there permanently, right? So the Petitions Committee is running illegally, right? And you need to accept and acknowledge that. So some of these MPs don't even understand at the moment their own job and the laws of the place they work or what they're even doing themselves every day, right? So if they can't understand that or don't, how can they understand the laws of this, right? The laws of, what powers and forces and rules are attributed to legislation and its underlying attributed effect and power, right? And commandments. And also the assisted suicide bill itself that they're trying to get through, which is on the subject of terminally ill people, right? Now, a lot of them are getting professional witnesses or they're giving evidence themselves. Ed Davey is a carer. He cares for people, right? Now, this is the thing. If Ed Davey is the Right Honourable Ed Davey and he's in the Privy Council and he's been an MP for a long time, but he doesn't even fully understand or know his own privileges, right? How can you trust his judgment, knowledge, skill and understanding, even being a carer, to really fully understand ill people or terminally ill and dying people and whether or not they should be allowed to decide they want to die and the issues around that, if he can't even understand, his own job in Parliament to do privileges, or if Jamie Stone can't even understand the Petitions Committee procedures and rules and how they're been wrongly set by Tony Blair, right? How can they really truly understand the terminally ill dilemma and issues and debate if they can't even understand other aspects of their job? So they're not a reliable, they aren't people that, I don't dislike Jimmy Stone. I kind of like him, which is, upsetting for me when he's taking these certain sides on these political issues, right? But I'm just trying to explain it from, my opinion. Now, so firstly, I don't actually think that MPs in general really understand the subject of this terminally ill bill properly enough to be able to vote on it. Because I think if they did, right, then they would understand that you can't do it because it's against the rules. And some of the rules of Parliament, like, for example, the King having to give consent to law, is not up for debate in this bill, right? And similarly, like the issue of the King giving royal assent to legislation is not up for debate in that bill, the source of legislation, the power behind legislation, and the commandments which compel legislation into force and effect is not up for debate in that bill, because you can't remove it through a debate for that bill, but you have to recognise it to effect and follow rules. And those particular rules which are inherited, right, into law, right, through the grace of God, and that actual set of rules which come inherited with that, right, which are to be understood and known and recognised, which is a main point, there's no for debate in that bill, right? And in fact, it says that you can't have that bill because it's a species of law which is not allowed. Like in the Magna Carta and the confirmation of the charters, there are particular laws which have to be upheld and kept, and rules which have to be obeyed and complied with by MPs, not just the people. The MPs have got, if MPs are going to debate, their working hours, or if they're going to debate, what days of the week they have debates, that is a separate matter from the bill itself and whether that bill should be passed, right? So, and that's the thing. Now, if we completely and totally move away from the issue of what is allowed and what is not allowed, right? On the matter of the bill itself, anyway, just as a subject, the assisted suicide bills, there's about 3 of them they're trying to put through now. One through Lord Falconer in the House of Lords, one through the Commons, and they're trying to get one through Scotland. So they're trying to kick, they're trying to do the cup under the ball trick and hope that it slips through, right? Now, this is the thing. These bills, I haven't read all 3 of them yet, but I've read most of them are similar, right? They're saying that this only applies to terminally ill people, right? And they've got to have particular conditions like cancer or some fatal life-threatening disease, right? But also, if a person is not mentally fit to make their own decisions, then the person themselves can't make a decision, right? And it's going to be a judge who decides whether someone should live or die, right? And it's only for a certain time frame. In the bill that I read, it was for 6 months, which isn't really that much long time. Now, this is the thing. Based on those 3 factors, that it only really is for periods of around 6 months or whatever. It rules out that if there's something wrong with your mind or brain, right, that you may or may not be fit to make a judgment. So it rules that out. And then it's saying that, you've got to get a judge to decide another person, right? And it's got to be like a complete terminally ill thing. By the time you finish with all that, to me, I just don't see the point in it. It's pointless. But the name of the bill itself is so controversial, and it conjures up images of euthanasia when you say assisted suicide bill, right? It's the name of the bill has purposely been designed to be controversial, to sound like it's euthanasia and possibly even genocidal, right? And to name a bill with a genocidal name and to name a bill with a euthanasia connotations attachment to it is just causing so much disruptive disturbance that it seems like it's designed to stir up and cause trouble and be provocative itself on purpose. And I think that the whole mission of that bill is to provoke people and be provocative, maybe more than it is to even intend to try and get passed. Not that you can pass it if you wanted to, because it's illegal, right? Against the rules of inherited commands and law of legislation and foundational government inherited commands of law, right? So, and this is the other thing, right? So it suggests that it's more to do with, right, physical pain than mental. But this is the thing. If you've got a mental distress, pain, trauma or something, right, which is excruciating, right, the more severe the mental impairment or pain or trauma or condition is, right, on the scale of extremities, the less the least on the scale that the mental issue is, then you wouldn't want to consider using the bill, right? The less mental problem you've got, you won't want to use the terminally ill bill. The more severe the mental pain is, as you get up the scale of severity on the mental scale, right, of suffering and pain and problems, you're getting towards maybe using the bill to end life, but at the same time, you're gradually getting more close to disqualifying yourself from being eligible to make a decision on it. So it's like travelling from A to B, and if you're at A, then there's no point using the bill, right, mentally. But by the time you get to B and qualified to use it on a mental issue, you've disqualified yourself, so you can. So the more, I know there are lots of intricate and complicated mental illnesses, right? But generally, the worse a mental illness is in general, the less fit you are to be making decisions on anything, right? But, so it's the mental aspect and factor, it seems to cancel out itself, because it's saying that the more severe the mental issue, then, logic decides that the more you need the bill. But as you climb up that scale of severity, they're gradually disqualifying you from making a decision on it. So it's like, right, on the mental side, it's a bit of a write-off. Now, coming on to the physical side of physical pains, right? Physical suffering of the body, right? The physical body, not including mental aspects and issues, although sometimes they overlap, right? Cancers and these terminal illnesses, right? From what I've seen, and this is when you get into all the evidence that Jamie Stone and Ed Davey are going to be giving from their professional witnesses and so forth, right? And their experience with disabled persons or people with long-term illnesses, but they're not using it for disabilities. It's not made for disability; it's made for long-term severe illnesses, right? But this is the thing: I've seen on YouTube people who have got terminal cancer and fatal cancers, and they've been making goodbye videos on YouTube. They've been sat there, and I've been watching videos of guys saying, "Oh, I won't be here next week when you watch this video, but I'm just saying, I've got cancer and I'm terminally ill with cancer and I'm going to die. So this is my bye-bye video." And they've just been there making a video to their YouTube fans saying, "Oh, I'm terminally ill with cancer and I won't be here next week," and I'm just saying bye-bye, right? So terminal cancers, they're all different types of terminal ill cancers, right? So why don't they list the specific ones, which aren't going to be the ones that, you quite find making YouTube videos a week before you die? This is the thing, I know that might not be the greatest example, but, and the other thing is this, I just can't see, no matter what professional witness that you get in, right, what their expert field in law, in medicine is, or what their expert, qualification is in medicine, and there are many different complicated and intricate ones, from brain surgeons to, cancer experts, neurologists, and so forth, right? You can have, this is the thing, right? You could have an injury or accident which results in unimaginable pain or suffering, right, for a week, month, or year, which isn't fatal or terminal, but it could be near impossible to bear it or put up with it while you are injured or when you have to go through that injury, right? It could be more intense and crucifixional or even unbearable, right, for that, 12 months or even 5 years, right, till you get better. That could be a higher intensity and level of pain and suffering than the 6 months for someone who's terminally ill, but you're not going to get any right to end your life through that. So I just think it's absolutely bonkers. And it definitely is a foot in the door bill, for sure. They're definitely trying to just get the door open so they can start going along these lines, right? Because, they've been trying it and it's get rejected. They got the idea out there and now they're trying to put 3 bills through at once, right? To me, it seems more like graffiti. It's like the whole enterprise of this assisted suicide thing, to me, is more of a campaign and a slogan, right, to cause social reaction through the meaning of the wording of it and its implications, its euthanasistic and genocidal connotations, right, than actually any benefit from getting the freaking thing put through into force, right? It seems just like a big shit-stirring mission, because I don't see the logic in the benefits from it in comparison to other things like, if you've got an absolutely unbearable sciatica and every time you stand up and sit down, it's unbearable, and you wish you weren't here. It could be acting to suffer for longer time than 6 months. And then on the mental side of it, this whole thing, whether you're fit to make a decision or not, right? So it's just absolutely bonkers and ridiculous. It's just the most stupid idea that anyone could come up with. And that Lord Joff guy, he really does look like a plonker, and he's deceased. He's not even with us anymore. And I don't even know where he got the idea from, but Ed Davey I think Ed Davey thinks that he's doing some good for, because he's a carer and people with disabilities. And it's the whole kind of Ed Davey movement, this Liberal Democrat, Jamie Stone. But that wasn't the previous Liberals, the previous proper Liberal Party opposed this when it was, raised before. And I think it's more of like a cult than anything else. It's a carer's cult, right? It's some kind of, it's like the Ed Davey gang, right? They kind of like, if you push people around in a wheelchair, or if you interact a lot with people with disabilities and suffering. But nurses do. People who work in hospitals, full-time. I know that Ed Davey is a full-time carer, right? But if he has to do the job of MP, he can't be doing it as much full-time as people who do it in hospital for a absolute, their proper job. Even if it's family members, some people say that is a full-time job. And I'm not trying to patronise or undermine or condescend that in any way at all. But it's a little bit like the Ukraine thing, get behind the Ukraine flag type of vibe with it, right? It's got that, send aid to Ukraine kind of vibe to it. Everyone put the Ukraine flag on their Facebook page sort of thing. It's that type of vibe, but it's not like, it's like got that, assisted suicide. It's making a point in the wording of the bill, and I actually think that there's more point to the wording of the bill and the fact that they're trying to get it through than actually any benefits from getting it passed and into effect. I think that it's a little bit like the Ukraine campaign in the way that they want to try to make a point, and the point is we support Ukraine. It's a message, right? So I actually think that the assisted suicide bill its actual purpose is as much as to attempt to carry a message than it is to actually get it put through, right? And, and also, right, if Ed Davey and, Jamie Stone don't understand that, fully understand all of the implications, that really, there are some worse and more severe things which won't be included in the bill, which could be even worse than, the things that the bill does deal with, right? And therefore, it would seem silly and pointless. And to understand that, it makes you wonder, can Davey understand his own privileges for when he's driving his car? And can Jamie Stone understand, that the Petitions Committee has been set up corruptly by, Tony Blair, right? And so forth. So how can I have any faith in these people being able to be competent enough to vote on such bills through Parliament or any MPs, right? Added to the fact that you can't do it because it's against the rules. It's against the rules and commandments of the inherited rules of procedure, right? Now, And those rules of procedure are not up for debate in this bill, because they can't be debated away in this bill. They have to be dealt with as a separate issue of themselves before such bill would ever be able to be seriously entertained and put through, right? So and teaching them the rules and teaching them the law, right, is not debate. It's not a political debate. That's education, right? So the whole thing with the assisted suicide bill is that MPs need to be educated that they can't do it and they're not allowed to do it, right? And that cannot be ignored. Unfortunately, I don't think that particular issue is being given fair attention in the debates, right? It's all just about, whether it's morally right or wrong, and is it going to be beneficial, and giving evidence of certain persons who are suffering and so forth, right? So until they raise that issue of, can they actually do it or not? Is it legal and lawful? It's not a political debate to be had. It is a process of educating these people. In the same way that Ed Davey needs to be educated about his privileges, in the same way that Jamie Stone needs to be educated about the Petitions Committee not running lawfully, right? So it's all about education, because if you're not educated in the law, you can't understand and follow the law, right? Or if you don't believe in the law and don't comply with it and obey the rules, then what is the point in being in the business of law, which is being elected in to be an MP, right? So, there are quite a few issues. But I've made my own petition, which I'm going to submit, and it's kind of like, it's got a prayer in it, but the prayer is educational. It's an educational prayer to educate them on the law, right? Because petitions are meant to include a prayer, and you can submit them. And it could even be judicial, because if it's on the legal points, that's judicial means, it's a legal point. So I'm going to submit to the House of Lords that it's a judicial petition of a judicial matter, and it will be received about the legality of that bill that's trying to be put through, the Scottish one and the English one, and the one from Lord Falconer as well, that it's just not lawful and these people need to be educated. It's of a judicial nature insofar as that it's on a point of law. Well, it is on a point of law. It is definitely on a point of law that it's not lawful, right? So, that's it. And I know they're not going to like it, but that's the thing. So, I think they should be looking at, changing they're trying to change the whole fundamental structure of government by having these Scottish parliaments and senates with these ridiculous circle-shaped business rooms with computer desks, as if they're all kind of executives sat around some sort of room, because no one can remember to read anything off a bit of paper anymore, or can't even remember it off by heart or anything like that, It's not like everyone's just stood in a hall reciting poetry, off the top of the head, because they're all super intelligent and inspirational, like spontaneous of the moment, right? They're all having to sit and read stuff off the computers, it's almost kind of like, where's my braille sheet or whatever, they like what maybe that wasn't the best example to use, braille sheet, but like what Dominic Cummings said, everything in Parliament's scripted now, and if anyone goes off script, someone in the room looks around and says, we'll can't have that happening again. That's the kind of flavour that is going with all these computer screens popping up in these EU model parliaments, which I don't think there's anything wrong with the UK Parliament if we had ministers in it who weren't corrupt, who weren't it's more about the people and the place. They don't need to redesign the structure of the government and parliaments, it's about people. But anyway, I just wanted to get those few things down, because I might actually contact some of these people now